Hello and welcome to episode 324 of Total Saints podcast. Before we start, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our TSP patron community. We've had some fresh faces join us since the season ended. So a huge welcome to Andy, who has joined our James Beattie tier, Frank Thorpe, who has joined our Mick Channon tier, and Jonathan Cooper, who has upgraded from the James Beattie to the Mick Channon tier. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your support. Coming up on this summer episode, as you can see, Martin Starke is absent today, so you'll have to make do with me. Glen Delacour, writer of the blog League One -10. Can't get the name of my own blog right. I think Martin is away spinning cheesy 80s disco hits at a wedding. So as he's not here, we have our very own dancing queens, Mr. Steve Grant, owner of Saints Web, and Mr. Alfie House, senior Southampton reporter for the Southern Daily Echo. Welcome, chaps. So, lads, having watched Saints be crap all season, you decided that watching Tommy Tuchel's England would be the perfect pick-me-up at the end of a long, hard season. How's that gone so far, Steve?
Oh, diabolical. I mean, those two games in June, I mean, I know the timing of them is from players that have been playing at sort of the highest of high levels in English and European football. All season, and the intensity is absolutely insane. The last thing you want is two more fixtures tagged on to the end of the season, and frankly, those two games showed. But at the same time, you would kind of like to have thought that new manager in town and players would be out to impress him, but that doesn't look like the case. No. Yeah, a lot of players playing at half pace. A lot of players just frankly looking way past it now. I mean, Kyle Walker at the City Ground was just extraordinary for just how bad he was. I mean, Senegal were a side that turned up, and at the end of the day, most of their players have been through long, hard seasons as well. They play in top divisions all across Europe, and yet they were very motivated to beat us. First African team to ever beat England, which surprised me. But yeah, I mean, I would argue it's been a long time coming. I mean, a little bit before my time, but Glenn, you probably remember that Cameroon game in Italia '90, where
yes, I do.
Quite how we managed to win that, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, we probably should have lost the record back then. But yeah, it's gone now, and then obviously a fairly drab 1-0 win over Andorra, which actually I don't think was as bad as people made out. If you look at the stats, I think we had about 25 shots. XG was like 4, and we've only scored 1. It's just, well, okay, that happens sometimes. I think it was just the way the game panned out in terms of, I mean, the half-assed team selection. Dan Burn getting another cap, which is just ludicrous. Him playing like he should have been playing in the Andorra team, kind of backed that up as well. And yeah, it's just, I mean, it's bloody hot that afternoon, that sort of early evening in Barcelona as well. And yeah, it was just a game that nobody really wanted, I think, other than the Andorrans. And yeah, I mean, they did what they usually do on home soil, and they made it very difficult. But I think we should have been a little bit smarter, a little bit better at moving the ball quickly and getting things done. But I mean, Tuchel will ultimately look at it as well. We got out of there with a win and a clean sheet and no proper embarrassment. So we kind of move on. But if we're still putting those sort of performances in once we come to the proper games against Serbia in September, then yeah, we're in a whole world of trouble, I think.
Yeah. So Alfie, you anywhere near getting over the loss of Gareth Southgate yet?
Well, you know I'm not anywhere near that, obviously, Glenn. I've made that quite clear, to be fair. And obviously, I'm in the stands of the City Ground, and I'm trying not to let that be the overriding thought, because ultimately that's been and gone, and we didn't get over the line, all this sort of stuff. But some of the team selections have been a bit puzzling. I just, Steve makes the point about playing Serbia in September and things like that. We've only got 4 camps until the World Cup next year, and I know that teams like Spain are better and stuff like that, but they just look so much more prepared than us. And we've got 35-year-olds playing who shouldn't be anywhere near the team, and Jordan Henderson, Kyle Walker. Anyone who's played for Chelsea is an automatic starter at the moment. If you haven't played for Chelsea, you've got no chance. So that's worrying as well. But yeah, it's so early days. There's no point losing your head like I probably did in Nottingham.
Yeah, I mean, I admire your dedication. I mean, I saw my first England game on the TV Alf Ramsey was the manager. That's how long ago it was. And I've never been less interested in the England team than I am now. But anyway, enough of that. Moving on, the reason that we kind of decided to do this podcast today was because of a very interesting and informative piece that Alfie wrote, based off an interview we did with our owner, Dragan Solak. There was a lot to unpack in it, and we'll chat through the main points of it. If you haven't read it yet, I suggest investing in subscribing to Alfie's coverage in the Daily Echo. We'll put a link up for that in the show notes. Before we get into the specifics, Alfie, how was the whole experience of chatting to the man? Like, is he one of these guys that seems wary of the media, or is he comfortable and he's happy with difficult questions, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, look, I think it was a surprise, first and foremost. I think it was about a week before I went. I got the phone call from the club, and they said, do you want to sort of travel to Slovenia and sort of chat to the owner, who obviously no one's spoken to for 2 years, apart from sort of Jim White, very fleetingly on TalkSport every now and then. And I was obviously, absolutely desperate to do it. It would be an amazing opportunity. And to be fair to Dragan, it turns out he is a very avid reader of the Echo, and obviously we've had to be critical of Sport Republic's first couple of years here because it hasn't been good enough, and he's definitely seen all of that. But despite that, he was really hospitable. He is a nice person. But we went there on a Tuesday morning, I think, and by the time he sort of got to his golf course, he currently lives on a golf course, by the way, which obviously, if you're a billionaire, you can do, and I'm sure that's brilliant. But we travelled there on Tuesday evening, had dinner with him and his wife, and obviously Adam Blackmore from the BBC was there. Phil Parsons, the chief exec, was there, and obviously the communications guy as well. So, a lot of conversation that night. Did the interview Wednesday morning, and then had lunch with Dragan and his wife again as well. So there was a lot of time, outside of the interview as well, to actually talk to Dragan and pick some of his thoughts on what's happened the last couple of years. Staff that he's had to let go and move, the disappointment that his money has effectively been wasted so far. But what's really obvious is that he's much more involved now. When he first came, he was this investor. We always said he's not the football guy; he's the investor. He just says, "Here's the money, and do what you want with it." But I think after a couple of years of people wasting that money for him, he just wants to make sure that it's doing, it's going to the right place. So he is chairman now, and I think he's quite involved. But at the same time, he realizes that he's not the expert, and that he's hired people to do that for him. And I think that's obviously important and interesting. But yeah, as a person, I can't fault him. Clearly, he's a very successful businessman, but he seemed quite intent to get to know us and to chat to us a little bit. And, I think obviously it's all positive PR for him, and that's probably the aim of the game, isn't it? But it didn't feel like he was, making that the be-all and end-all, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So getting into the specifics, Steve, there was a lot of focus in the interview, because Alfie obviously had to ask the difficult questions. There was a lot of focus on Rasmus Ankersen and Henrik Kraft as the sort of like two main figures of Sport Republic. I thought Dragan's answers were quite sort of politically worded, put it that way. What did you think of the sort of like the mention of those two guys and how things have changed with regards to who's actually pulling the strings behind the scenes at Southampton now?
Yeah, it's obviously fairly clear that neither of those have very much. They're entitled, as sort of still board members of Sport Republic, they're entitled to kind of have their two penneth worth. But ultimately, Dragan, by the sound of it, won't be leaning on them very much. Maybe a little bit from Rasmus Ankersen in terms of structuring contracts and things like that, but I kind of think there's probably enough experience in house now with Johannes Spors, who must have covered that sort of stuff before. So yeah, I think what would have been interesting, given obviously we've seen those answers in the written form, was how did it work when you were out there, Alfie? Was it a case that you got some time with him on your own, and then Adam Blackmore got time with him on his own and did a recorded session separately, or were you both together in one session where he's obviously put out the recorded section and you've done the written bit? Because I must admit, I'm not listening to the BBC version.
No, it's so it was separate interviews. They were one after the other. So I think Dragan spoke to Adam first in this little golf hut just on the first tee, I think. And then I went in afterwards, and we had about 35, 45 minutes each. So there was loads of time to get through stuff.
Okay, so
you didn't have to play golf and be shit just to keep him in a good mood, did you?
I didn't. No, I didn't have to play golf. I mean, I would have liked to give it a go, but I mean, I've never picked up a club in my life, so it's probably better that I didn't.
Yeah, and so I guess the thing that would have been kind of my interest would have been kind of if we had a recording of kind of, obviously you can read words and you can infer whatever you like into them, kind of infer any sort of tone, but it would have been interesting to obviously have a recording of the way that conversation went and the way those words came out, because how pointed was it that he mentioned that Kraft isn't involved anymore and that he's kind of pushed Rasmus more into kind of maintaining things at Göztepe, because I mean, in fairness to him, he seems to have done a good job over in Izmir, which is handy because it means that he doesn't have to spend very much time in Southampton.
Well, look, I mean, I asked him directly about Henrik and about Rasmus, so he had no choice but to talk about it and to be honest with it. And I think that it was quite clear that he basically accepts 100% responsibility, as he would do as the lead investor. But he made it quite clear that they didn't mean to make mistakes, which suggests that he thinks they did make mistakes. Didn't mean to get things wrong, which suggests he thinks they did get things wrong. So, I think he was defending his men. Obviously, he was one who backed them. They're his partners. He went into business with them, so he takes responsibility for that. But I think there was a tone that they got things wrong.
Yeah, I think ultimately I think we've kind of said this over the last couple of years, haven't we? Where we've kind of thought, well, Solak's putting all this money in and seeing it frittered away on absolute nonsense. He must be pulling his hair out. I think, we were supposed to be partners in this. Why? How are you making such a pig's ear of this? So yeah, I guess it's kind of good for him to have said that without saying it. I mean, at the end of the day, he's never gonna. That he still has to work with these guys, so he's never going to fully throw them under the bus. But there was kind of just enough kind of holding a toenail to the to that front wheel for a couple of them, wasn't there, in the words that he said. So I think ultimately everybody should have got the message that he wasn't happy with the way that those two were operating, and as a result, neither of them are front and centre anymore.
I'll tell you what, though, there was a proper, there's a proper line from someone who sees himself as a leader. You've already mentioned it there. I take full responsibility for every wrong decision that we have made since we invested in the club. I mean, to come out with that, I think is pretty significant. It shows that he's sort of like saying the buck stops with me, really. And I really like that. There's not enough of that in this world, particularly in football, is people accepting responsibility for what's gone wrong. But moving away from the
thing on that, Glenn, if we can, before we move on, is that clearly, I think Dragan made it quite clear that Rasmus is still his personal advisor, he called it, on transfers specifically. And I think when it comes to selling players, Rasmus is currently still sort of the chief guy. He's the top dog for selling players. So Johannes is working on the players that are coming in, and he's working on the list of players that are available to sell. But I think he then passes that list off to Rasmus, the players who are available to be sold, and he tries to negotiate the deals. And we've said on the podcast before that it was Rasmus who sort of did the 53 million Romeo Lavia deal. So I think in the background, I think it's probably been Rasmus this whole time, sort of doing the sales and stuff. So, I guess you made the joke, I think, in one of our groups, if I could say it, Glenn, that ultimately he's bought these players in and they haven't been good enough. So it's up to him to try and get rid of them for as much as possible. And that looks to be the case with sort of Hamilton and Paul this summer.
It wasn't exactly what I said.
No, I've dumbed it down a little bit. Yeah.
That was the gist of what I said.
2 or 3 more expletives in it.
Well, no, I said something about is basically like messing the bed and then washing the sheets, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's better off if you don't mess the bed in the first place. But it's the least you can do to try and clear up your mess afterwards. But moving on from Rasmus and Henrik, which hopefully we can do. I mean, the other sort of one of the other main points that he made was, you obviously asked him about the rumours that were going around, fueled by Simon Jordan, about the club being for sale, and I thought the answers to that were quite telling as well. That not ruling out having an investor to come on board, but ruling out an overall sale. Was that the answer you expected?
Well, I think, to be fair, he was much more sort of honest and open about it than I maybe expected, because I just predicted that he'd keep his cards close to his chest on that one. But actually,
he was very clear, wasn't he? He was very clear on the situation, I thought.
Absolutely. There's no sort of room for guessing. So you remember, obviously, when that first came out, we tried to follow up a little bit on it and just sort of get the gist of it. And I had a couple of conversations with some people who had been in contact and got the idea that, Solak wasn't directly looking to sell the club. And that turns out to be true. But he's gone a whole step further and, said that we did have sort of text messages from the Saudi Arabian investors. And he basically told them to get serious and said, look, if you want to buy the club or part of the club, then send me a letter with what your intentions are. And he said, I'm not 100% against having a business partner. So, in the future, we could see someone come in, buy a little bit of the club and put some money in alongside Solak. By the way, he actually told us that his name's pronounced Dragan Solak. I don't know if that's going to catch on because everyone's so used to it being Solak now, but I may slip in and out of the two. But yeah, then he said, I've just took a firm position that I'm not selling the club. And from there on, he says, I've never thought for a second about selling the club. And I think, it's good to have that clarity, isn't it? Because when those rumours go around, you start to think some people obviously want to sell, some people don't. But we know exactly where we stand now. He's not against a bit of investment from somebody else in the future, but right now he's not selling the club.
No. So, yeah, and it was interesting that he did say as well that if he ever did think of leaving, then he wouldn't leave the club in any sort of financial difficulty. And he repeated again that no money has been taken out of the club, which is a refreshing thing to hear, bearing in mind all the sort of horror stories you hear from other clubs about, about owners bleeding them dry and things like that. So, anyway, moving forward, I noticed a little piece you put out the other day about more on-pitch stuff for this season about not relying on loans this season, which is an interesting one. So he definitely listens to TSP because we've definitely said that. So not relying on loans this season because it causes you problems in the event of going up. As you know, we had to spend 50 or 60 million quid just to stay at the same level that we were when we got promoted, and that didn't stand us in too good a stead this season. The other thing I noticed, Steve, asked you one. He said quite a bit out loud about increasing the capacity of the stadium and the waterfront area development and all that stuff. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Nothing on that is going to happen overnight. I mean, you're talking. I mean, there's like the waterfront stuff. There's still firms operating out of those areas directly opposite the stadium. That's still it's still an active site. So I don't see how there is kind of any feasibility of anything happening even in the next decade. I mean, I know the gasworks site immediately behind the Northern obviously got bought by developers, and the gasworks have been completely dismantled. Supposedly some flats going up there, but I don't know whether the development costs have kind of even kiboshed that, maybe because it's it's quite a small footprint to be able to make any real money on development. And I don't know what Southampton house prices are like sort of in the city these days, but I can't imagine that part of town being especially desirable, even for a new build. So it's I certainly heard a rumour that Saints were looking at kind of having first refusal on the site if the developers decide now we're not interested anymore. But frankly, I don't know what they'd be able to put in that space. But I mean, it's good that they've got these kind of secondary ideas of how to bring in kind of additional revenue streams, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to compete at a sort of really high level. Every club of our size has a glass ceiling. You could overachieve for a period of time, as we did for probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, a decade or so ago now. And Brighton are doing it at the moment. Brentford are doing it at the moment. Bournemouth are doing it at the moment. But every club has kind of headbutts that glass ceiling eventually, and you will eventually make a few mistakes and slide the other way. But having these additional revenue streams and other avenues where you can get money into the club and use that to improve your first team on a sort of more structural basis, that gives you a much more sort of solid base, and it means you're not reliant on being 99% successful in the transfer market every year. because, I mean, frankly, it's unsustainable to be able to do that. So that then gives you the leeway to make a few mistakes, and you can be a little bit more bold in what you try and do as well. But yeah, as I say, we're talking years, many years into the future. But as I say, good that they are at least looking at these angles and what they might need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested by the line that's come out recently about the season ticket sales for this season being more than they were last time in the Championship, bearing in mind the absolute shambles that was last season. I find that remarkable. That I'm not for a moment hinting it's not true, but I just find it remarkable that our support and how it stands up even to the absolute garbage that we saw on the pitch last year. So
well, I think one of the key things is that Glenn, obviously from last season in the Championship, that was before the change of the stadium layout, right? So there is a higher amount of tickets available right now than there was that time in the first place. If that makes sense.
Good point.
Because of moving the away fans. So I don't think they've quite reached the levels of season ticket sales from last season ahead of the Premier League, naturally off the back of the playoff win and all that sort of stuff. But you're absolutely right. Given how bad it is on the pitch at times, the fact that people are still putting their money in, and I think it is appreciated. It should be. If it's not, it absolutely should be. I'm sure it is. And look, it was fun in the Championship, wasn't it? So hopefully people are maybe sort of thinking there could be 90 points again, and you never know.
Well, I think there was a thought process this time 2 years ago where, because we'd been in the Premier League for 12 years consecutively, we didn't really know what we were stepping into, dropping back down into the Championship. Whereas, obviously, this time we know what it was like 2 years ago, and it's not changed. If anything, it's probably a weaker division.
Yeah,
and as a result, I think the fear that we had 2 years ago just isn't there because, as I say, we've seen what it's like. We know that we can compete even when there were defensive issues, as there were all through that promotion season. Could see 60 goals and still got promoted. So I think there is kind of a view that, I mean, at the end of the day, we should be winning more games than we're losing. And as a result, people are quite
win more than one at home this year.
Yeah, that'd be nice. And then you kind of hope that, I mean, at the end of the day, people want to see a winning team, and people are more willing to part with their hard-earned cash when they are seeing that winning team, especially if you're kind of competing for trophies, competing for promotions. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not hugely surprised the numbers are good, I guess I'm slightly surprised they're kind of as good, because I kind of expected the makeup of Championship season ticket holders to be a little bit different from the ones we had this season just gone in the Premier League.
So going back to the interview with Dragan wasn't just about the overall runnings of the club. There were a couple of mentions of actual on pitch and what was going on there, particularly around the one quote that I picked out of it. It was the need to reduce the size of the squad, but regardless of that, there are three areas that they've identified that they need to bring in players regardless of what happens with the rest of the squad. That's how I read it anyway. Is that is that accurate? And was there any mention of which three areas? I mean, I think we can all have.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there is. So basically the full context, I suppose, is that Dragan, he believes that not replacing Jason Wilcox, obviously last summer, was their biggest mistake. The guy who built the environment, and he said that's a big mistake, and I take my part in it. We went into the Premier League a little bit unprepared. So this time around, Johannes Spors is the new Jason Wilcox. He is the man who's looking at the squad. He's saying who he wants, who he doesn't want. And what Johannes has done is he's told Dragan and Rasmus in this instance the three positions that he has to have a brand new player in, even before anybody goes out. If nobody is sold, if everyone stays, he has to have these three. Obviously, Joshua Kwashi, the centre back, is one of them. The next one's a striker, and as far as I'm aware, that they're negotiating for a striker right now. It feels like personal terms are pretty close. It's just going to have to come down to the bid for the clubs, basically. And they're pretty confident they can get that done. So they think they're going to have a striker in soon as well. And then the last one's a creative midfielder. So Johannes Spors has told Solak he wants a centre-back. He's got it. a striker, and a creative midfielder as the three key areas. So, yeah, that I thought that was quite an interesting admission from Dragan, and quite sort of interesting that he would tell us that.
It was one of my questions for later. We might as well do it now. So Joshua Kwasi is 20. He's from Germany. He's 6'4", and he does the 100 meters in about 4 seconds by the sound of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume from what you're saying there that it's anticipated that he will be a first team squad player, despite only ever really playing in lower leagues in Germany. Is that the vibe we're getting?
Yeah,
he'll
be a first team squad player. Definitely, he'll be in the squad. Yeah, whether he starts or not, well, I guess we'll wait to be seen. But the Bundesliga 2 is an unbelievable league, by the way. Like, I know it's the second division of Germany, but they get 50,000 attendances on average every single game. I've been serious. If anyone goes and Googles the Bundesliga 2, they're enormous clubs. So I guess they feel they can make that step up. And like you said, he is young. He's going to have to make the step technically, but Dragan, he said he's an extremely intelligent player. Obviously, you've spoken about his physical capabilities. So, yeah, but the striker they're dealing with is also physically tall, headers, stuff like that. So they're clearly going for that physical profile, speed, power, and just overall height, I guess.
Yeah. So within the existing squad, one name was mentioned, and I think we're all interested in this one. Aaron Ramsdale. Now, I mean, personally, I hold absolutely zero hope of him remaining a Southampton player, but it's been mentioned about a possible loan deal. I mean, personally, I don't see how that can work. So he goes on loan to a mid-table Premier League club. He does reasonably well. Saints get promoted, and then he's got to come back and do another relegation battle next year. I don't really see how this works. There is kind of a precedent. Jack Harrison at Leeds got relegated. He's spent 2 years at Everton. I don't think he's torn up any trees, and Everton are skint, so he's actually back in the Leeds squad. But I don't really see how that's going to work, because Ramsdale's going to go to a club unless he doesn't do very well, gets dropped or whatever, doesn't play much. I mean, do you sort of like, or does anyone, either of you, kind of see how that can possibly work?
No, not really. Same thing that you mentioned, and also, given that he's our highest earner by some distance, I think the financial side of things has got to come into it. I mean, he's obviously not lost any value over the course of the season, despite obviously us finishing bottom and conceding 80-something goals. He's held his value. If anything, his value might even have increased. I mean, what did we pay? 18 plus various add-ons, hardly any of which will be paid. Because that team. But yeah, I mean, you could easily sell him for 25. Surely, there's got to be.
Well, apparently, it's been reported in the Times it has a 20 million relegation release clause. I don't know if that's true, but that's the Times, so you'd assume it probably is.
Okay. But that's still profit. It's
yeah. It's probably a good time to say actually that there was an article by Jack Rosser, who's a Saints fan, in the media, who's put out that there is no need for a fire sale at Saints. So maybe the thought of us. I mean, there was like a sort of perceived wisdom when we went down last time that we had to make 100 million on player sales. Maybe that just isn't the case this time. I mean,
I think there's still an element of that, of course, because ultimately you lose the revenue. So there still will be big sales. Yeah. Still has to be big sales, and the squad's huge, so that is part of it as well. But yeah, we've been saying for the last couple of years, haven't we, that it seems like the finances are just sort of slowly getting a bit back to where they should be. Obviously, there was small profit in last year's accounts because of all those big sales and stuff like that. So it seems like it's edging a little bit more towards the green, I guess, than it was last time.
Yeah, so I have to wait and see on that one. But
Ramsdale, while we're there, I mean, I play devil's advocate then, because I agree with you. It seems fanciful, doesn't it? A loan for a player like that does seem like it is too good to be true. Playing devil's advocate, I guess how it could work is, Dragan's basically said that Ramsdale likes being down the south coast. I'm pretty sure that's because he's, family-wise, I think he's obviously just got married actually last week, but I think they live in Winchester or Bournemouth, whatever it is. So there's obviously reasons beyond just football to want to be down here. But then he wants to play for England in the World Cup next year, or be in the squad at least. So he wants to play in the Premier League. So I guess it could work in that he just goes to a Premier League club for this one season, keeps playing games, gets into Thomas Tuchel's squad, and then he still gets to come back down south and live with his family here, I guess, if we go back up. So you'd have to assume they'd have to cover all the wages because you're spot on. You can't pay 100 grand to a player that's not yours in the Championship. So I guess, but it would have to be you cover all wages and maybe get a small fee as well to cover that sort of cash flow they're not getting. Yeah. But that's how I see it could work, I guess. But maybe it won't.
It's interesting with the England thing because goalkeepers, that rule doesn't really apply. James Trafford's been in the squad all year, playing for Burnley in the Championship, hasn't he? So
yeah, but then James Trafford's 21's keeper, I guess. Like Harwood-Bellis in the squad, but yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So we have, it seems, got to the point where some of the shifting of, let's call them deadwood, some of the shifting of deadwood has happened. The first, or is beginning to happen. The first one is our... I don't know how to describe him really, so I'll just say tall Paul Amo-Ameyaw seems to be finally on his way to Trabzonspor for roughly £7 million. Are you sort of like happy with that one happening, Steve? I mean, I'm fascinated because it's Rasmus Ankersen who's obviously trying to sell him, and surely there's a conflict of interest in there somewhere, seeing as he's the chairman of another Turkish club. But yeah, there you go.
I'm not sure the Turkish Superliga has any kind of PSR requirements. Obviously, there are UEFA things for those that are in European competition. But yeah, it does seem a little bit odd that. But I think Turkey was always the likely destination. They're the only ones that will pay the wages, and it's a place where he's been before and been reasonably successful. So yeah, I'm not surprised. Not surprised even that it was Trabzonspor that came back in for him, because obviously they were heavily linked a year ago. Couldn't do the deal because they basically wouldn't pay anywhere near what we were asking. And it turns out they've come back and more or less offered what they did a year ago. So with a year left on his contract, frankly, I think that's probably decent money, and we just accept, okay, yeah, it didn't really work out. Wasn't quite what we needed. But I mean, earned us a few quid on t-shirts.
Yes. Got a design in the TSP shop if anyone wants one.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he got 4 goals last season, was our top scorer. Which kind of just shows where the problem, one of the many problems lie for this squad. But yeah, I mean, it's wages off the wage bill. I think we will likely be trying to get a little bit more out of Ross Stewart in a similar sort of role. I mean, hopefully not the same kind of role we saw for Amo-Ameyaw away at Ipswich, where we basically just pump the ball into the clouds and hope that he could do something on his own with nobody 50 yards anywhere around him. But it's a shame it's not worked out. But I mean, again, it's another one of these ones where we've paid big money for a guy, and it's floundered. January transfer windows in the Premier League don't seem to be our friend. And actually that's kind of one kind of tick in the box for Sports Republic, in that they didn't do what they could easily have done January just gone, and just said, well, sod it, we'll chuck 40 million quid at you, Ivan Juric. Here's three players at 10, 15 million quid a pop. Make something out of this and do something useful. And it's just like, well, what's
probably
the
point? One positive of being 20 points off by Christmas, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
There was no hope.
Yeah.
So they didn't bother. But I mean, Ivan wasn't happy about that, obviously. I mean, on Paul, though, they offered 5 million quid last year, Trabzonspor. So they've come up a little bit this summer. But selling to them has been an absolute nightmare, because they were late. It was a ball ache, if I may say, for lack of a better term, getting the loan payments from Paul Amo-Ameyaw's loan to Trabzonspor a couple of years ago, because of delayed payments and things like this. And also, I think they still owed some money from Orsic as well. So I think obviously who is real, by the way, he exists. Orsic actually plays football, I think, at some point. We didn't see that, obviously.
But they obviously bought him.
No, he's been released, hasn't he? But they obviously bought him in January the year after, or whenever it was, the summer after he came, and they still owe some money for that. So, it's not ideal dealing with Trabzonspor, but ultimately they want Paul. They're the ones who, obviously, they like him the most, don't they? He scored that, what was it, goal of the year sort of qualifier, wasn't it, where he was nominated for goal of the season or whatever.
Goal contender, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah.
I mean, with Paul, I kind of thought, initially when I thought about next year, I thought he might be a useful option off the bench, but at the end of the day, he's not fit enough to play every game.
Exactly.
And 46 games in the Championship. Yes, he'd be a handful. Yes, he'd probably score a few goals. But I think you need players in the. I've had enough of having like squad players. We want players who could potentially play a run of games in the first team, and I don't think Paul was ever going to be able to do that. Just physically, not there with that. But so
there was a question in the chat then before we move on, just to. The Will Steele's backroom team, and there's been quite a few comments about it, so I thought we'd just go to it. I guess the answer is we still don't know what his full backroom team is going to be. I certainly don't. Maybe someone does. But one of his brothers has gone to Anderlecht, so there was a comment that said his brothers will be in before the season starts. But I mean, I think Ed Steele is now the assistant manager at Anderlecht, so he probably won't be coming. That's for sure. And I've reported that basically the club have done a deal with Paul Trollope to name him Will Steele's assistant manager. That contract, I don't know if that contract has been officially signed yet. It was meant to be signed on Monday, then it was Tuesday, then it was Wednesday. And I haven't checked in for a couple of days. Obviously, I've been off a wedding. But I presume there's no complications there and that'll all get done. But it sounds like Paul Trollope will be Will Steele's assistant manager at least.
He's got a good track record.
2 promotions, 2 relegations, got a lot of experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, but as a manager and as an assistant to someone slightly less experienced, so he comes with a wealth of experience in different roles, which I think, sort of being versatile, I think plays to our advantage really.
I'd be interested to know if Will still knows him, or if it's just an appointment that's been sort of foisted upon him, sort of thing.
I think that he was definitely involved in the selection process, but clearly Johannes is leading that kind of thing. So it might have been he just met him now. It's a good point. Does he? Is he a mentor from time before we don't know about? Maybe.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that one works. So moving on with the players, the other one who's been linked with the move away is Kamaldeen Sulemana. Now, if Martin was here asking the questions, I 100% know this question would be coming to me. So. For all sorts of reasons. So Ivan Juric wants him at Atalanta. Atalanta have been overachieving for a while, and they're obviously on a mission to stop doing that. Both with Juric and Kamaldeen. I'd see fees of 18 million euros.
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 Very much euros.
Doesn't matter.
Still 15 million quid. That's mental.
Yeah. So surely
bite their arm off.
Snap the hands off. Now I'm gonna bring Steve in here because he had an interesting point in one of our chats about the sort of like book value of players with regards to PSR. So what was the deal with Sulemana in your opinion?
So he was on. So when we signed him in January 22, is that right? Yeah, it must be. He was 23. Sorry, 23. Signed on. Paid around about 22 million quid on a 4.5
club record.
Club record. Jesus Christ. At least it's not Vestergaard anymore, anyway, or Carrillo, or any of the others. And so the way that gets accounted for is you basically split it up year by year on the sort of evenly across the duration of his contract. So as things stand, Kamaldeen is still worth about 10 million quid on our accounts because there's still 2 years left on that 4.5 year deal. So if we sell for 15, then that basically goes in the books as a £5 million profit, even though we obviously will have received £7 million less. So that's just one of the sort of few vagaries of one of the many vagaries, I suppose, of the PSR regulations and also how clubs account for player transfers and stuff, because you can, while a player that you sign, you depreciate that player's value, that transfer fee over the course of the duration of their contract, so you can spread it out over multiple years, which is why Chelsea were doing this. We'll give them a 9-year contract and amortise everything over that period and pull wool over everybody's eyes again. When you sell someone, you book the money immediately. Hence why all of these hence why this time last year there were that raft of absolute nonsense, corrupt deals between like Villa, Chelsea, Newcastle, Forest, all the clubs that you would absolutely expect to be doing these sort of transfers. Did them and funnily enough, just managed to get themselves the right side of the PSR line for last season. So yeah, frankly I'm quite surprised there's not been more of the same this year. But I suppose we've got a week left to go. So let's see how that pans out for the next 7 or 8 days. Then there may be a few complete unknown under 18 players suddenly being valued at £25 million coming through in, as I say, in the next week or so. But yeah, just a kind of interesting thing on how we would be booking that transfer. If we sold him for 15 million, we book it immediately. You bin off the 10 million value of what he's still worth in inverted commas. And yes, so it would be a technical £5 million profit, even as I say, even though obviously we've paid, we'll have received a lot less than we paid for him up front.
Yeah, let's not dwell on what we've got out of him for the last 2.5 years. So basically with him, I won't lose sleep over him going, even if he does well for another club, because after 2.5 years and 5 managers, I think I've accepted he was never going to do it for us. I've seen it said that he would boss the Championship. That was what was said last time, and he didn't do anything. So yeah, it's all very well beating a man on the halfway line, but can you do it in the final third, and then can you have some sort of end product at the end of it? So I can't see this one coming back to bite us, but I mean, hopefully we manage to put some sort of sell-on clause just on the off chance that it does. But if I turned up at St Mary's every week thinking this could be the day that it clicks for him, and it never did. And I just got to the stage where it's just, as everyone knows, where I just thought, I'll just get this guy out of here. So others will disagree, but time will tell, I guess. But I'm not expecting Uric, Sulemana, and Atalanta to be a dream combination that suddenly sparks him into life. But anyway, so moving on. So people have asked us basically to look at the squad that we've got and try and predict what will happen. Alfie might know stuff. I don't know. It all will be revealed. But so I've kind of grouped the players in the squad into groups to talk about. So the players I expect to still be here for a variety of reasons. Feel free to comment on anything that you think might be different. So I'm expected to still be here: Bazunu, McCarthy, Manning, Bree, Wellington, Kay Sander, Stevens, Edwards, Nathan Wood, Joshua Kwasi, Flynn Downs, Shay Charles, probably, Will Smallbone, Sam Adozie, Jay Robinson, Ryan Fraser, Ross Stewart. I mean, does anyone have any doubts that any of those will still be here next year?
No, only Wellington maybe, but that's not off of any information. That's just a slight suspicion. But other than that, I think they're all pretty nailed on, aren't they? Let's be honest. Like I say, for various reasons. Some of them are not going to be of interest to anybody else. Some of them have got long contracts. Some of them are, Alex McCarthy, for example. No one's going to buy Alex McCarthy. He's got a year in his deal. He'll be here probably in the squad. So yeah, I think that's a pretty sound assessment. Yeah.
I mean, the only one, Flynn Downs has obviously been linked with Russell Martin and Rangers, but I don't see as they'll ever be able to get near affording him.
No chance.
There's been whispers over Shay Charles maybe getting a Premier League club and being this year's Nathan Teller, having done well in the Championship. So, but no, in the main, I see all those still being here. So, moving on from that lot. So, bearing in mind what we said about Jack Ross's quote about no fire sale needed, you're looking at Tyler Dibbling, Mateus Fernandez, Taylor Harwood-Bellis as the ones, along with Aaron Ramsdale, of course, as the ones that we thought we would be moving on for money, to try and sort of like plug the gaps in the finances. So where do you kind of go to Steve first? Where do you kind of see it with those guys? Dibbling, Fernandez, and Harwood-Bellis.
mean, Harwood-Bellis is a fascinating one, isn't he? Because he did an interview on Sky Sports yesterday, I think, where actually the tone of what he said was very much, I'm staying, which I must admit I was not expecting. No. Given that he changed agent in February, which is usually a sign of a guy looking for a move somewhere. His on-field attitude was questionable. I think we would.
Yeah.
I think certainly Glen would agree. I don't know about you, Alfie.
It wasn't great.
And yeah, it kind of had all the hallmarks of a player who thought he was better than the team. And I mean, maybe he's had a period of kind of introspection. Someone's put together a video nasty of all of his sort of passes out of play, where he then blames someone for not being 20 yards away from where they were initially. And
Roy
he's
Keane,
kind of
perhaps.
had a change of heart and thought, maybe I'm better off kind of staying here and having another year of developing and actually being in a sort of winning team for another year. And then, okay, next summer, if that happens, then you've got a year's Premier League experience, and you've then got the momentum of playing a full championship season in a side that's done well, hopefully. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that interview has kind of confused things, because I must admit I fully expected him to be banging the door down, trying to get out of here. But perhaps not. Alfie, any?
Yeah, well, I agree. Well, no, I agree with all your points, Steve. I think I tweeted yesterday. Well, I was actually at the wedding and just sort of had a couple of minutes to have a think. I would love Taylor Harwood-Bellis to stay, because clearly he's a top-level championship player. Yes, he struggled in the Premier League and he struggled to adapt at first, and then, like you said, the mistakes and the body language, I guess, at times wasn't perfect. But he is clearly good for the level. But it's easy to say that in an interview, isn't it? Like, he's not going to say anything else. He's not an idiot. So he says the right things.
Then why do the interview?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So that he's currently injured. Obviously, he had ankle surgery a couple of weeks ago, and as far as I'm aware, I didn't hear that mentioned in the interview. So it could have been an interview to come out and say, "Look, I'm fit, I'm ready to go," which would be a come and get me sort of plea, I suppose. But I didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear it up there. I didn't know if they told it. He said how bad the injury was. Will he be playing? Pre-season. Obviously, he's not in Slovakia, is it, right now, with the 21s who've just reached the semi-final of the Euros. So clearly he's badly injured enough. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting timing one for sure.
Just playing devil's advocate for a second, is this maybe this new agent hasn't come up with any possibilities for him?
Well, I mean, from what I've seen at the moment, the only sort of plausible route is Burnley, and it's like, well, you've done that one, and they kind of moved on from him fairly quickly and fairly well. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we've said all along on the pod, haven't we, that ultimately Saints are probably not going to sell him for less than the 20 million quid they paid, and nor should they. And who's going to pay 20 million quid for him? So maybe someone will, and I'll look, egg on my face, but I don't think I would. Not yet.
And he won't walk into the first team of anyone who is
other than three promoted teams,
not a relegation battler. So he's going to have a fight in his hands to get a game. So maybe
there was a very tenuous link somewhere to Chelsea. Do they remember that a couple of weeks ago? And West Ham, of course. Yeah, but Chelsea
was that a Joe Shields thing?
I don't know, but it interested me because obviously they've got Strasbourg, and he probably is the perfect level for a team like Strasbourg right now. So that, I mean, I think it was one of their in the know accounts who's sort of a bit hit or miss maybe, but I just thought that was an interesting one. That was a weird one that weirdly I actually could see happening, him going to Strasbourg and playing with the Blue Co 11. But who knows?
Yeah, I having been out on loan once, I'm not sure he'd want to go to. I'm not sure he'd want to go to Chelsea and be one of 2 million players like he was at Manchester City. So,
but he'd be one of 2 million players on 60, 70 grand a week
for 9 years.
Good point.
So it's a different question when you're only on 5 to 10 grand a week in City, coming through the City's system. Well, it's still nice money, isn't it? Obviously, but it's different levels.
Yeah.
But the other one in that group, Matty Fernandez. Now, I'd heard something towards. I'd heard something towards the back end of last season where we basically had a list of 8 players sort of first team or saleable assets that we were going to be moving on, and Matty Fernandez was not one of them. He's kind of the guy that the club seemed to think, because obviously we got him tied down to a long-term contract. We only signed him a year ago. He's only 20, or is he still 19? Yep. I can't remember. And so he's still got a lot of development to go. Seems reasonably comfortable in the area at the club. And as a result, wouldn't necessarily be kicking and screaming and banging the door down to get out of here immediately. I mean, I've since seen quotes from fairly recent, I think, where he's just pissed off with football and losing every week. So actually, maybe the kind of tide has changed on that one. But yeah, I mean, if you could keep someone like him for a season in the Championship, and then say get to the end of the season, if there's an offer on the table for 35-40 million, then by all means we shake hands and go our different ways. But then I've seen his performances for Portugal in the under-21s, and he's been probably their best player.
It's not helping. I saw one game and he was
not
ridiculous. So, no.
Well, and don't forget that Johannes Spor said a creative midfielder is one of the 3 positions they have to sign immediately. So I don't know if that has any bearing on the likes of Tyler. He's a hard-working, industrious one, but he probably would go down as creative in my books, but maybe not. Maybe you're right. But it's only one that did. Go on.
Yeah, no, they definitely need someone in that role. I mean, last time in the Championship, we had Stuart Armstrong still, didn't we? Who had that, who could sort of break into the attacking lines and pick passes out and things like that. And if Fernandez does go somewhere, then we would not have a player of that profile. So that's.
I think one thing that's quite clear is the club. They've said to me, I think privately a couple of times, that they really don't want things to go late in the window again. And I said to them, look, everyone says that every year because sometimes you can't control it.
Everything is a chain. I mean, it's like me going through my house purchase. I'm waiting for somebody else, and they're waiting for me, and it's just an absolute nightmare. One bit of the chain needs to act, and then everything kind of cascades into place. And we're not at the top of the food chain anymore. So we're waiting on movements for, higher up before we can kind of likely make our big moves, and they won't necessarily be our first choices either.
But you remember that? So last time in the Championship, I think we played Sunderland the next day, right? So I think I'll probably say it.
Holgate.
Yeah.
Did you see this, by the way, on the Premier League social media?
Yes, I did.
They put an 11 of out of contract players who were available. Yeah. And Mason Holgate was the right back. I mean, you've got Carl Walker-Peters there, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And Mason Holgate is the guy that you choose. It's just like, what are you doing?
But in September 2023, on deadline day, Stuart Armstrong got a late offer to go somewhere, and I think he was quite keen to take that offer the day before Sunderland. I think it was really late in the day, and he wanted to sign. But they basically said no. They had a certain time of the day, and they shut the phones off. And it came past that time, and they shut the phone off, and they stuck to that. So if they can just bring that time forward by a couple of days rather than hours, and just say no, we're shutting the phones off on Monday or weeks, shutting the phones off on Monday, we're not doing anything else, then maybe they can do that. But like you said, I totally agree. It's all a massive chain. So
yeah, and I mean the other one in that group was Tyler Dibbling, who of course in January was being linked with moves to everywhere. Obviously didn't have the best second half of the season. And he's still here, and it's reasonably, it's gone reasonably quiet. I'm still expecting that one. Personally, I'm still expecting that one to happen at some level, because there were too many teams sort of like interested in him. The biggest one, of course, and the most obvious one is Manchester United, with Jason Wilcox now the director of football there, and apparently being a big fan. So, I mean, you heard any sort of whispers about that one?
Spurs, I think, makes less sense now, doesn't it? Than it did sort of a month or two back. But
why do you pick that? Out of interest.
I don't know. He just doesn't feel like a Thomas Frank kind of player. I think Brentford were a team that were very direct and very fast. Yeah, and his game is kind of seems to be stronger in a team that's kind of methodical and more build up, and he can go kind of dribble with the ball and go slow, quick, just over that short little burst. Whereas Brentford were very kind of quite overt in the way that they played, in that everything was done at 100 mile an hour. And yeah, I just don't think I don't think he would fit into that style really. And I'm assuming Thomas Frank will largely try and get Spurs to play that way. I actually think the Spurs squad is quite well suited to it. Frustratingly, because that means they might be half decent. Because it's much more fun when Spurs are rubbish, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, it just feels like he's not. It's weird because Spurs is kind of the level that I think he's about right for in terms of the sort of stature of the club.
Yeah.
But perhaps not that in that particular club, perhaps.
No, I think that's probably a good analysis of things. Yeah, Newcastle have always been interested in Dibbling. Even when he went to Chelsea, they were in for him, trying to get him to come. Obviously, he scored that hat-trick at St James's Park, if you remember, the one that sort of launched his career. So, Newcastle was interested. English manager, for it. So that's a good one. It's interesting with Tyler, isn't it? Because, I mean, I think Southampton, obviously, as we've spoken about before, they value him at about 50 million quid. That's what they think would be a good amount for him. And I think, obviously, he had a bad second half of the season, as did everybody else. But they still believe that he is the best player they've produced in their academy for a decade, if not more. Certainly up to sort of the Luke Shaws of the world. So, they're not. I don't think they want to be bullied into taking less for him. I don't think they should. I know people aren't convinced by him, but he is technically unbelievable, and he just maybe needs to find a way to grow into the game and keep that confidence or whatever it was that held him back. So I don't think they're going to want to drop the price. But like I said, right now, Man United, can they afford to spend 50 million quid on a player who isn't going to improve their first team right now?
No
Probably
chance. Not,
because of the final. So no. And like I said, what other clubs are there that are actually going to be willing to pay that kind of money for him? It makes it difficult.
Yeah. So moving on, Steve mentioned Carl Walker-Peters there. He's obviously gone. As far as we're concerned, the only question is where he rocks up. But that's someone else's problem now, not ours. Jan Bednarek obviously missed the last few games of the season with a non-injury, highly possibly. I assume that's one you would expect to happen somewhere in the next week when another year of his contract's up. I don't know, but there's been no whispers around him. He's been away playing with Poland and various things, hasn't he? So.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that he wants to leave the club, and that the management are happy for him to leave as well, obviously providing they get a decent offer. So, yeah, all being well, I think everyone's happy with that one.
Relatively low buyout, hasn't he? I think heard somewhere in the region like 6 million or something.
Yeah,
which
is a decent deal for someone. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. It's good for everyone, I think.
Yeah,
but he's on big money again. So yeah, shifting most of our high earners is not a bad thing, I think.
Okay. Moving on, I've noticed we're up to the hour already, but we'll keep going if everyone's got the time. So the next sort of group of players, the ones that I couldn't really categorise, they're kind of floating around. I don't really have strong opinions one way or another on these guys. Joe Aribo, Yuki Sugawara, Charlie Taylor. I'm kind of like, all three of those could still be here next year, or none of them could, and I don't really know what to say. Aribo, I think, has only got 1 year left on his deal, so they'll probably be looking to sell him if they can. Sugawara, will his defending be up to the championship? I wouldn't have said so before that last game of the season, but he defended pretty well in that game, so maybe.
And he can cross a ball, which is what Will still wants. He's one of the very few players in the squad that can put a ball in. Yeah, so maybe.
And Charlie Taylor, an experienced player, he just strikes me as being really, really solid. But again, I mean,
but at the moment we do have about 1 billion defenders, don't we?
So I guess,
and where are you playing him? Are you playing him centre back or are you playing him left back?
Yeah, well, he can't play on the left in a Will Steele team, that's for sure. Yeah.
We've got two left wing backs really in Manning and Wellington, both perfectly capable of playing that role. A sort of more flat sort of back four left back. He's probably it's probably his best position, I guess. That's where he played for Burnley all that time. Or left centre back if we're playing three at the back, which I think Steele likes to do, doesn't he? So,
on occasions,
and again was pretty good back end of the season when he got a chance. So who knows?
Yeah. So I'm going to have a little game here. I'm going to have a little game of keep, bench, sell.
Okay.
so I'm talking about we have 3 strikers who are very similar in that they've all been crap in the Premier League, but they've all done it in the past in the Championship. One of whom has done it for us. So again, we could end up keeping 0 of these players, or we could end up keeping all 3 of them, or any combination. So I was just we'll go with you first, Alfie. So Adam Armstrong, Cameron Archer, Ben Brereton Diaz, keep, bench, sell. What are you doing?
Yeah, it is tough when you say that. You've got to keep one of you. You have to keep one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
One. Okay. Honestly, I'd probably keep Cameron Archer, which might be a surprise. I'd probably bench Adam Armstrong, and I'd probably sell Ben Brereton Diaz.
Why would you keep Cameron Archer?
Because he's got pace. I think he's a bit younger than the rest of the 2. He's got pace. They've bought him for a lot of money, and I think that I could see him working in a team. Clearly, he wouldn't be able to play as a number 9 for Will Steele because of obviously the need to get headers in the box and stuff. But I could see him as a wide man. Whereas Ben Brereton Diaz, I think Ben Brereton Diaz is actually a decent player. But he's just been awful at something. Mentally, he was shot so quickly, and I don't see him ever recovering from that. So for me, for his career and for Southampton, I think he has to go. And I think he'll do well in the Championship wherever he goes. And then Adam Armstrong, he's reliable, he's dependable, he's got a decent character, he challenges the manager at times. I could have him in the squad. He scored goals on that level.
Yeah. Steve, same question. Keep, bench, sell. What are you doing?
Same answers, actually.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, Archer attitude is a question, I think, because if you remember back to, obviously Alfie did that interview with him where he said, well, if I'm not here, I'm not bothered. In January, it's like, well, it's not really it's honest, but it's not what you kind of want to hear, I think. But then maybe we need people with different views on things and different sort of challenge, maybe in the Championship where he can. When he was at Middlesbrough, he scored bucket loads of goals in an attacking team, and you create chances for him, he will score. The problem that we had last season was that exactly the same as what he did at Sheffield United the year before. First quarter of the season, we were creating chances for him. He scored a few, looked quite promising, and then as the season wore on, we were creating fewer and fewer chances. The ball stopped coming, so he stopped making the runs. And I think in the Championship, if you get him off to a good start, then there's a 25 goal a season striker in there. Adam Armstrong, we know, could do 25 goals a season in the Championship. But that 6 months on loan at West Brom in the second half of last season is a bit of an alarm for me, and it's not what I was expecting. When he went to West Brom, I thought, well, that's going to cement West Brom's place in the cement their place in the playoff places, no problem. But then Tony Mowbray played him through the middle,
which we know he can't do. We know he can't do that.
Which was really surprising because Tony Mowbray is not an idiot. He's a football manager who's been around, especially in the Championship, knows his way around the Championship and knows Championship players. And for him to have done that was really surprising.
Did they not have anyone else?
Well, they had Will Lancashire on loan from Spurs, who's obviously never played a senior game before. He's a good young talent, but that was their other option, I think. They must have had an injury.
Because they had, it was the American guy, Daryl DK, came back with about 6 to 8 weeks of the season to go and I think did all right. But yeah, it was a disaster, that loan move. And yeah, you kind of wonder whether him coming back now has this season, certainly the first half of it with us and the second half with West Brom, is that kind of the sea change in his career where all of a sudden now, even in the Championship, he's not the player that he was. How old is now? 30?
Well, I mean, So I change my mind all the time on this.
28, Steve. Come on, Glen.
No.
Yeah. So I change my mind all the time on this, and I've arrived at exactly the same as you did. But the reason being that Adam Armstrong, I feel that he will still have it in him. He will still want to be a Premier League footballer, but he probably knows that should we get promoted, we're not going to try him again because he's had 3 ropey seasons with us as a Premier League player. So he's probably going to want to move to another Championship club in order to try and sort of fulfil that dream and get that chance to do it again. Archer would fetch the most money if we sold him, but potentially he's the best of the 3. Didn't impress me much last season, however, and I thought the drop off after the first few games was quite alarming. But all strikers are confidence players, and if you're not getting the ball or not scoring goals, then you do tend to see quite a downturn there. Ben Brereton Diaz is fascinating because he can't be as bad as he showed.
That's the point I keep saying to people. Everyone says, "Oh no, you're wrong," but like watch his clips for other clubs. He can play the game.
Maybe he is. I mean, Armstrong had the spell at West Brom, which didn't go well. Brereton Diaz has now been. He was at Villarreal for 5 minutes. He was at Saints for 5 minutes. He went to Sheffield United. Didn't set the world alight. Obviously, they've changed their manager now. More on that in a minute. And so that fanciful 10 million buyout option to buy is highly unlikely to happen. But so we've all gone for keep Archer, bench Armstrong, sell Brereton Diaz. If anyone disagrees with that, stick it in the comments. But to be honest,
I mean, it could be sell, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. If we step outside of the rules I imposed on it, then I'm really not bothered if any of them stay or any of them go, and that's quite damning in itself. After the,
I would have thought that right now, given the fact that Dragan said that we need to trim the squad down to 25 or 26 players, that all 3 of them are available for sale, and that say 2 of them go, maybe that the other one's circumstances changes and he's no longer available. He's part of the squad, but right now I reckon all 3 of those are on that list that Rasmus has to try and find new clubs.
Yeah. So obviously, the more exciting part of the transfer window is incoming, and obviously we don't really know what players the club's looking at, but obviously a lot of people think they know what players the clubs are looking at. So I've had a quick look around the internet, and under the banner of breaking news, there's been quite a few.
Is this another game where you throw names at us and we have to say whether?
Yeah, say whether you're. Well, it can be. You can treat it as a game if you like. I mean, obviously the situation with Aaron Ramsdale is a little bit up in the air. Obviously, we're all expecting him to go. Alfie, you stuck your head above the parapet on X earlier on this week and said that you thought Alex McCarthy would make a decent number 1 choice for this season. We have been linked with a couple of goalkeepers that I can find. One called Christos Mandas from Lazio, who's 23, played about 10 games in their first team last year. And slightly alarmingly, Asmir Begovic, a free transfer,
Jesus,
who is 38. Now, personally, I think that link is rubbish. It's just weird. It was the Portsmouth Evening News who actually reported that. I assume because
just on the wind-up,
you're probably on a wind-up. I mean, what do you make of those?
The literal definition of clickbait, getting their idiots just to click through to it, just to have a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're going to need a third choice goalie, aren't they? So Joe Lumley's obviously going to be released in the season, so they're going to need a third choice, and they do typically
don't look quite so happy about it, Alfie.
I'm not saying anything, but obviously they do tend to go for a slightly more experienced goalie, don't they, for a third choice? So, I mean, I'm not saying they should, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did end up as a third choice goalie. That's on no information. That's just a general theme.
Yeah, I just can't see it being Begovic. He's 3 years older than McCarthy. I just don't. I think one of the lessons that I hope Saints have learned from this season
if you're going to have a third choice keeper, he's got to be available to play. He's got to be able to play. And at that age, I mean, was it 2.5 years since he played a game of any note? Unless he played a couple of cup games for Everton, because he was at QPR and left there under a bit of a cloud. And went to Everton as backup, and I think maybe has played a couple of Carabao Cup games, maybe FA Cup games against proper lower league sides. It's like, well, you're basically retired, mate.
I vaguely remember him playing for QPR against us, and he let a goal in, and he went to try and punch someone or something stupid like that. Very strange.
Well, he was.
character.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the QPR team when we played there. Oh God, when was it? When Charlie Austin was playing for QPR.
Yeah,
I think he was their keeper then.
That's a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, to be fair, on Begovic, sorry, last point, because I don't think it's going to happen, so it's pointless. But to be fair to Begovic, he played every single minute apart from one game of the previous championship season, and he was on the bench for about 50% of the Premier League matches for Everton this season as well. So actually, availability-wise, he might actually be quite fit. He's certainly not been out for injuries, anything like that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and he scored against us in the past as well, of course, which is...
I think the bigger point on the goal is then you obviously stitched me up with the out of context Alex McCarthy thing, which is fair enough. But basically, you made the point that obviously you'd rather him be number one than Gavin Bazunu. And I love Gavin. I think he's a really nice guy. He's obviously a young man, but I agree with you. Right now, I'd rather McCarthy than Gavin Bazunu. I have to be honest.
So would I. I think if assuming Ramsdale is not in goal for us next year, then I think we need to sign another first choice or try and sign another first choice. I don't see the point in going down the route of signing a squad player. We did that last year. We signed a load of squad players who weren't good enough to improve the team. And I know goalkeeper's specialist and it's different and stuff, but no, sign a first choice or don't bother. Promote one of the youngsters.
One quick question: do we think that Gavin Bazunu would be a good substitute goalkeeper? That my concern would be that he feels like the sort of keeper that needs to be playing and be in a run of games. Because if he comes in cold, then obviously when we saw in his first season for us in the Premier League, there were concentration issues, there were little errors that were avoidable. And I kind of wonder whether if you're only potentially bringing him in for every so often for a game, like if whoever the first choice is is injured, ill, suspended, whatever, that actually he's not going to be a very good sort of backup replacement, if you like.
No, I agree, but you can't play him in the first team because of that, can you?
No, but he wants to play. So I honestly, he could leave, couldn't he? Really, to be fair, because at the point, I mean, he's always been desperate to play matches. That's why he left Man City in the first place. So he's not going to want to be number two either. Does that leave him with a future here? I don't know.
Yeah. So moving on, obviously Kyle Walker-Peters has gone. We've been linked with various right backs, and I can't make up my mind whether. I mean, because Walker-Peters has gone, obviously the people throw these right backs at you and say Southampton are interested in signing these guys. They're obviously not looking at the fact that we've got two right backs already in the squad who are probably okay in the Championship. So do you think, in James Bree and Yuki Sugawara, do we think that we're going to be looking for a right back? And if so, the names mentioned are Max Johnston, plays in Austria, Scottish international with one cap. Kane Kessler-Hayden, who's been kicking, he's from Aston Villa, but he's been kicking around on loan in the Championship. He played against us for Plymouth, I think, 2 seasons ago. So those are the two names mentioned, and some American guy. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Not because he's American, but because the link was hilarious. It's because Pochettino said he's decent, so they linked him with Saints.
Brilliant,
brilliant bit of journalism there. So
yeah. I think that obviously I don't know loads about either of those players, but Kane Kessler-Hayden and Max Johnston, it seems like the right profile of player, doesn't it? They're both fairly young.
21 and 22.
Exactly. So Sugawara, it feels like, I mean, ever since sort of mid-February, it felt like Sugawara had been linked with moves away, and it seems like, Serie A clubs would get him. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he left and they buy one. But I think until he does, I don't think you can buy another one, really. And he's obviously not on that magical 3-man shortlist of things we need right now. So clearly the board don't see that as something that they have to do until one of those two leaves.
Yeah, and one link that has been made, because he played for Will Still in France last year or the year before, is a lad called Juma Ba, who is a Manchester City youngster, central defender. And obviously, as I said, there was the link with Will Still. bearing in mind the question mark or now the increased possibility of Taylor Harwood-Bellis staying, do we need another central defender?
Well, I think Juma Bar, I think, has gone to Lyon anyway on loan as part of the Rayan Cherki deal. So that one's done, I think.
Okay. Good research by me there.
Sorry to stitch you up.
That's all right. Midfield players. I mean, it's interesting. We could have the dream scenario where we have Flynn Downs, Shay Charles, and Matis Fernandez.
I thought you were going to say the dream partnership of Will Smallbone and Joe Aribo again.
No, I was unlikely to say that. I think people know me well enough to know that now. So one name that came up. There was a couple of players I'd never heard of, but one name that came up was a 36-year-old player who's got exactly the same birthday as me. I didn't know. He's born on the 20th of November, but 20 years after me. Player we'll all remember, Dusan Tadic, apparently being released by Fenerbahce at the end of his contract.
Sign him up. Do it now.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Oh, I mean, at 36, he would still absolutely take the piss in the Championship. It would be ridiculous. And I am absolutely here for it.
Yeah. When he was here, I used to, on occasions, concentrate on the things that he couldn't do rather than the things that he could. And having watched some of our so-called creative players over the last season, you realise that actually having some quality, being able to thread a pass, being able to put a cross on someone's head, all that sort of stuff is what we really should be concentrating on. So, yeah, I mean, there's always room in the squad for one sort of golden oldie. It didn't quite work out with Adam Lallana last year, obviously, but no, if that happens, I'm here for it. That would be good. So, moving up the pitch, wingers. We're obviously going to be linked with wingers. It's probably the weakest area of the squad. It's where the squad is shortest, and not just because of Ryan Fraser. So the one name there's a couple of names that were funny. There was a guy called Oliver Antman. I mean, the jokes write themselves. What's that? Known as he plays for Go Ahead Eagles in Holland. He's from Finland. He assists all over the place. So he was one name I saw. A name that popped up last year, Jezeran. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right. Sorry, Jezeran Raksaki, Crystal Palace. Had a half decent season with Sheffield United last season, and a guy called Lucas Capeda, who is a Chilean international left winger. We've already got one of those. Would we really want another one? I mean, we are obviously going to be in the market for wide players. So, I mean, what do you think of any of those guys?
Don't know, to be honest. I mean, I guess we look at what we've got already, which is, I think, basically Sam Edozie and Ryan Fraser. In kind of those sort of exact positions. I guess there's a few players you could shove into those positions, like Brereton Diaz, for example. I guess Aribo you could play wide up front, sort of, maybe. Adam Armstrong on the right, of course. So I mean, it's not like it's a position we don't have any players in, but it does also feel like a position we don't have any players in. I think ultimately those players I've just listed there, I mean, you'd be okay with them featuring relatively regularly, but I don't think you'd be kind of hanging your hat on they're a guaranteed first 11 starting player because they are head and shoulders above anybody else in their position. There's a lot of much of a muchness there. Edozie, seem to do okay at Anderlecht on loan. His highlight reel is very good, as you would expect.
Picked up a few injuries, didn't he? Missed quite a few games.
But then he did that when he was available for us, didn't he? He had these little niggly injuries just at the point where he built up a run of games and was kind of looking really good. So I mean, I'd like to see what we can get out of him.
I think definitely have a look at him for sure.
He at the moment he would be kind of my sort of penciled in as my first choice on the left hand side, I think. Beyond that, I mean, frankly, I don't care. Ryan Fraser may be good enough in the Championship still, but we're a year on now from when he was decent for us in that team. Does the fact that the manager's not his golfing buddy make things different? I don't know. We don't. Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the situation is with Fraser because he's just vanished off the face of the earth basically since that red card against Leicester.
Leicester, wasn't it? I think all we can assume is that he will be here next year because he's got a year left of his contract, and that's what he does, isn't it? He sees out his contracts and then moves on for a free. So I'm not even with the golf connection. I'm not expecting Russell Martin to swoop down and rescue him from us. I was about to say, but it's probably the other way around. Okay, so moving on, strikers. We obviously know that that's one of the positions that's been highlighted that we are definitely going to look at, and the names that I've seen linked are all sort of big unit type of strikers who can obviously do a job protecting the ball and are decent in the air. So again, excuse the pronunciation, Fotis Ioannidis, Panathinaikos, Greek, 25-year-old target man, was linked last year.
Yeah,
had a very good season year before last. Not so great this year. I don't know the reasons for that. Damien Downs, youngster, Cologne, 21, born in Germany, plays in the USA. Moved there when he was a kid. 12 goals in 39 last year. And another one whose name with the jokes write themselves, William Goebbels. 23. He's French. He plays in the Swiss League for St. Gallen. Has played for all the French youth teams, so he's not going to be a mug. He looks to have a bit about him. I watched a few highlights of him. He looks half decent. So I mean, are we assuming it is going to be a target man, Graziano Pella type of striker rather than
I think somebody who can move across the ground as well, though. I don't think it's just a case of lump it up. They want somebody who's quick, who can press, obviously. So it's similar to Kouachi, I guess. They want somebody who does both of those sides. They're quick and they can win the ball in the air. Yeah. And they'll definitely have a look. Ross Stewart will play a part this season as well. Providing he can stay fit, obviously, which is always the asterisk. He'll definitely be involved as one of their key striker options too. So that's the sort of profile I suppose they're looking for, but maybe with a bit more speed.
It's good that we're looking at these physical attributes now that would have served us well if we'd looked at them a year ago.
Yes, exactly.
Because one of the things in the Premier League was that we were slow and weak, whereas having a team full of big and strong and quick players would actually probably have suited the style of play quite nicely, because it just gives you a much larger margin for error. If you've got players who, go back to what we said literally at the top of the show, Kyle Walker has basically made a career out of being fast enough to make up for all of his mistakes. Makes a mistake.
And now
again,
that he's finally not, it's bad.
Yeah. But because he can run 50 meters in 3 seconds, he's played the top level and won everything at club level. Having players of that kind of physique and the speed, because the pace of the game is just ludicrous these days. You can't fill a team that's got any hope of winning anything with players that are sort of slow and ponderous. You need to have a bit of strength, a bit of speed, and the intelligence to kind of marry it all together.
So, okay, there are so many unknowns, of course. So much work to do in the next couple of months. So, just in summary, Steve, how do you kind of feel about things going into next season as we stand right now? Confident or a bit apprehensive still?
No, I'm fairly relaxed. At the end of the day, the transfer business isn't going to be done overnight. It will be right up until that deal sheet goes in on sort of right on deadline. So yeah, Alfie, even though it's a 7 p.m. finish, I'm afraid you're probably still going to be working till 9 or 10, covering off the 2 deals that we get over the line right at the end, hoping that everybody's fax machines are working. But yeah, it's not going to be. We're not going to have our defined starting 11 on that opening game, which is crap, isn't it? Let's be honest. For any club that's looking to kind of plan for a season, and this is the problem with every club is going to have the same problem, because we still insist on having transfer windows that shut a month into the season, but because all the leagues start at different times, and because everybody votes in their own self-interest, you're never going to get a consensus across even Europe, like even among the top, like the sort of big 5 leagues, to get all of them to kind of do the same thing and shut the window like the night before the season starts, which would be the best thing to do, but clearly it's just never going to happen. So that means that everybody's kind of then, for a month, you're still kind of, it's almost like a try before you buy type scenario. You go with what you've got at the moment, and you then kind of figure out in this sort of semi-competitive environment what's working and what isn't. And then, I mean, our priorities now, I mean, we know exactly what the priorities are in terms of recruitment now, but our priorities 2 weeks into the season may be completely different, because what Will Still puts together from this current group of players, or whatever it is we kick off the season with in August, they might not be able to do what he wants, and it might just be, well, okay, well, I still think this is the right way to approach things, but if we had somebody with this kind of profile in this position, it wasn't the position we were looking at. But actually, even though we're quite well stocked for players that play in that position, but not in a certain way. So maybe we then have to kind of change quite quickly and go, okay, well, we need to kind of think outside the box a little bit here and do a deal very quickly. And suddenly a guy that we weren't even like we'd never even heard of in June, suddenly is a key first team starter come the 1st of September. So yeah, you never quite know how these things are going to pan out, but I think as long as there's a kind of refreshing of the squad going on as we progress through pre-season, I think the friendlies will kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what the team shape's going to look like. And I think from that you will get a good idea. I mean, you're playing Eastleigh first game of the season. What did we stick 7 on them when we played them last season?
Yeah.
I mean, if you end up doing the same, then I think you've probably got a reasonably good idea that, I mean, yeah, well done. You can beat a team of 5th division players in the searing heat. But it's
that'd be useful.
Yeah, it's one of those that gets people sort of in the good mood at the start of start of pre-season, and then kind of thing like players leaving, which is still going to happen. People won't get quite so upset because they can actually see the direction that the team is travelling in, I think.
Where do you same question to you, Alfie, really? Where do you see things at the moment?
Similar in the sense that I think at the moment, I mean, I say this at the end of a 90-minute podcast where we've just spoken about it, but I think it's all largely pointless because ultimately we have no idea where we're going to be. So like things are going to change. There's going to be players who, big offers come in, people will get upset like they always do. And, it only really matters at the end of September. But right now they've got a lot of players. If they keep the right ones, they'll have a really good squad. If they keep the wrong ones, maybe a bit different. But you mentioned, I mean, if there is a midfield of Shea Charles, Flynn Downs and Matty Fernandez next season, by absolute miracle, then I would expect us to walk it, to be honest with you, or maybe not walk it, that's a bit rogue, but I would expect that midfield would be in the top 2 or 3 in the league without doubt. So they've got the players there, they just need to keep hold of the right ones. But yeah, things will change a lot. So, it's one of those, isn't it? Transfer rumours, they're 99% made up, so we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm sort of quietly confident, really. I think we got the manager in early, which I've always been of the opinion that the manager is the most important sort of person at the club, really. He's the one who's got to put the pieces together and get it working out on the pitch. We've got a director of football in place now. People are saying the right things about lessons being learnt, stuff like that. I like the line about identifying the key areas that needed, the three players we were going to sign, regardless of who went. I think that was important because there's been occasions where we've kind of hidden behind well, we've got to see who, see how much money we brought, we bring in, see who we keep and who leaves and all that sort of stuff. So, from where we are at the moment, I'm sort of quietly optimistic that things are gonna be okay. Well, that's definitely.
Well, look, Glenn, I think people are back in next week, right? No, sorry. Well, just to wrap up, I guess the players are back in next week, aren't they? So I think pre-season will start getting going properly. I've seen a few comments about the new kit launch tomorrow. Apparently, I mean, I'd be surprised by that. I've not heard that, and the current sponsor deal runs until July the 1st. So I would be amazed if they announce a kit with a different sponsor before the end of the old one on July the 1st. But I keep seeing a new kit release every single day on Twitter, and obviously it never happens. But maybe I'll be wrong. It might be tomorrow, but I wouldn't expect the new kit until July.
It was a big event for the kit launch last year, wasn't there?
It was, yeah.
You would imagine there'd be something along those lines this year. So no, I can't see it being tomorrow either. So, that's it for this first summer episode. It's been a few weeks where a number of our former managers have failed upwards, with Russell Martin going to Rangers, even Jurek to Atalanta, and even Ruben Selles to Sheffield United. So I can promise that none of us are failing upwards to podcasts with bigger followings like the Football Ramble, Arsenal Fan TV, or that bloody one with Mark Goldbridge on it at Man United. So we'll be back at some point in the next few weeks. Don't know when exactly, so keep an eye on the socials at Total Saints Pod. In the meantime, you may want to check out the TSP merch store. It's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. As I mentioned earlier, we're also on Patreon, where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. Each of our tiers comes with its own perks, including weekly shout-outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and Mick Shannon tiers. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Pete Montalbano, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer and James Kibbe in the Francis Benali tier, and also to Nick Reed, Dave Ernsberger, Nick Hingston, Phil Cook, Jonathan Cooper, Colt Baker, Anthony Thompson, Matt Hall, Mike Etheridge, Phil Horstrup, Mark Littlewood, James Bobin, John Bevan, Liam Dempsey and Frank Thorpe in our Mick Shannon tier. Huge thanks to Paul Castle Associates and Steamtown Brewery for sponsoring TSP this season. Thanks to Steve and Alfie for putting up with my inane rambling. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening and commenting, etc., etc. And we'll see you all again next time, whenever that may be.